you've got parliamentary elections coming up in Georgia next year. I'd like to begin by asking you whether you would consider or have considered running, forming a party, taking part in parliamentary elections.
I'm the president right now, and I have a mandate that runs until after the parliamentary elections, which are supposed to designate the new parliament that will designate the new president, since in our constitution it's the last time that the president is elected by the people. So my plans, if one calls that plans for the time being, is to go to the end of the mandate and to play the role that should be that of a president, to try to bring more consensus in a country that is deeply polarized. That of course will not be easy during election years. It most probably on the country would accentuate this situation. And more important even is to try to support all the political forces that will aim at fulfilling the 9 recommendations that we have to fulfill after the receiving, hopefully, in a few days' time, candidate status. Then we have that year afterwards until the elections, including the elections, to show that we are delivering on this advance that is made for Georgia. So these are my plans. If I see that I'm needed in a different format for fulfilling these objectives, then I will see.
So if Georgia's EU future is on the line, you would consider perhaps forming a party or entering the parliamentary race in some way?
No, I would say it differently. If Georgia's European future is on the line, I would consider anything.
Okay, so you're not ruling out taking part in the parliament?
I'm never ruling out anything. If I'd ruled out anything in my life, I would probably be still a French diplomat.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the EU summit, and that's right now on the agenda, Thursday and Friday this week. It's crunch time. This is where a decision is going to be taken about whether Georgia becomes a candidate state for EU membership. How bad would it be for Georgia if the answer is no?
Very bad, without any question mark following the, because it would mean very deep frustration in the public opinion, even deeper after the recommendations made by the Commission. Now, I think everybody is convinced that the answer is going to be yes. This is supported, by the way, by many statements that I've seen even in the very recent days of different countries saying that they fully support Georgia's receiving the status of candidate. And the recommendations were so clear and definite of the Commission that people are convinced. My view is still that we owe to the 27 member states to not consider anything as done before it's done, because anything can always happen. But clearly the frustration would be enormous, and that would give in hand to Russia a huge satisfaction. Because of course, and we all know that frustration is what can be best exploited by people that manipulate propaganda, fake news and all of that, and they will start blaming the European Union for once again forgetting Georgia, letting Georgia down, and all these themes will of course come from and play for Russia.
So a no to Georgia this week would be very dangerous?
Would be a yes to Russia.
Would be a yes to Russia?
Yes.
How certain?
And geopolitically it's the same thing. Russia will consider that Georgia remains in a grey zone, and we all know again that for Russia to consider any country as being completely in a grey zone means that they consider that it's theirs to play with.
How certain or how confident are you, though, that it will be a yes?
Well, I'm like the Georgian population. I'm confident because I frankly did not completely see or expect the recommendations of the Commission to be so neat and so clear. I was thinking more that they would relate to the European Council to make really the formal decision without prejudging the decision. In fact, this prejudgment by the Commission is reinforcing the confidence and also my belief that the Member States have finally recognized that beyond the fulfillment or not fulfillment of all the criteria, which is very important, and I understand that for European Union and for us, and maybe first for us, this is very important, but they've also recognized that there is a strategic dimension in all of that, and that at this point in time, when we see all these geopolitical forces activated and many threats that are re-emerging, that it would be very dangerous to not cement this solidarity with Georgia. We're not yet at the end of our path towards the European Union, everybody understands that, but the perspective that was given to us last year, that maybe was not measured enough because it was on the background of frustration of not having received the status, the perspective itself would be kind of cancelled if we would not get the status now, because then everybody would think that, well, it means that it's a no to Georgia.
Realistically, the question yes or no to Georgia this week is intimately connected with the question of whether the European Union will begin membership talks with Ukraine.
Yes.
And you know, green light for Ukraine is green light for Georgia. No to Ukraine could be no to Georgia.
And I would say, and I would add to that, that no to Ukraine would be very bad for Georgia, not only because of the no to Georgia, which I described how bad that would be, but a no to Ukraine would be also disastrous for Ukraine, of course, for Georgia, because our fate is anyway linked in the future. It would be disastrous for the European Union. It would show that anybody can start bargaining within the European Union.
When you say anybody, the main obstacle to Ukraine is clearly Viktor Orban, Hungary.
That's how I understand it. And that would mean that Russia can start playing within the European Union on affecting, I would say, the decisions, not only based on the interest of the different countries, but based on how well Russia manipulates these internal discussions. And that's very dangerous.
Okay, so Hungary is crucial. And as it happens, the Georgian government has a pretty close relationship with the Hungarian government. Hungary, Viktor Orban has supported Georgia's EU future. So what communication is going on now between Tbilisi and Budapest? Is the Georgian government lobbying Viktor Orban to support Ukraine's EU membership? Are you involved in any of this?
No, I'm not, and I don't really know what... I know that there were visits, many visits to Hungary. If that has participated of the general support for Georgian candidature, that's fine. What is today the exact position regarding this link or not linking Ukraine and Georgia's future? That I don't know what have been the discussions.
What would your message be to Viktor Orban?
The one that I'm just saying. I think that for the future of Europe, for the future of Georgia, for the future of Ukraine, for the future of freedom, and for the future of the geopolitical stability that we know, we need this decision to be a positive one for Georgia, for Ukraine, for Moldova. We shouldn't forget Moldova because I'm a big supporter of Maia Sandu that has been very brave.
I can see how that message might resonate with many governments in the European Union. Do you think it will resonate with the government in Budapest?
I don't know. I don't have the type of intimate the connections to know how that would resonate. But I also think that internally for the European Union, let's forget about the objects of this decision. I think at the time we are in, when the European Union, and that is very, for us, a very good approach now, that they have re-engaged the discussion about enlargement, which we know a couple of years ago was kind of forgotten and left aside. I think that this type of bargaining does not prejudge well of the future decisions about enlargement that are very necessary, or maybe the crisis will push towards these type of decisions. Anyway, what is important is that the EU enlargement policy continues, that it's reinforced, because what we all need, and that's not concerning Georgia only, it's a stronger European Union. It's a European Union that has a stronger defense and security policy. Now maybe it's my old hat of diplomat working on these issues for many, many years. I think that the time has come for Europe to appear in the world as a very strong power. And that's part of being a strong power, is to enlarge to those countries that know what it means to fight for freedom.
Well, let's look at some of the details of this, because the European Union, as you said, the Commission has issued a report saying we recommend Georgia be given candidate status. In the same report, it's laid out the criteria and has said Georgia does not meet fully most of those criteria. I think you accept those sort of conclusions. Where do you think are the biggest deficits? What has Georgia got to do?
Well, Georgia has to do the maximum, I would say, on those criteria. I think that maybe sometimes, and I've said that to our European partners, so it's nothing very new, I think that sometimes those criteria are not very clear. They're vague. They're general principles. And that has been for a long time when they're talking about the reform of the justice. Even when it gets a bit more concrete and they're talking about the High Council of Justice and reforming it, what does it mean, the reforming? We all know that we need a stronger, more independent justice system. That's one of the bases for democracy. How do we get there is another issue. How fast can we see real progress, and what are the marks of this progress? When can one say, well, yes, we now have a more independent justice system? Because we have had times in Georgia when we made big progresses, then we went backwards, and again some progress. So it's a bit tricky, and I think that the general population shares this objective, but I think we need more clarity and more, maybe, and it's not very optimistic, more agreement between the political forces, including among the opposition forces, on what are the first stages that we all want to see. And then we can measure the progress against those markers.
There are some specific things mentioned in the European Commission's report. It says, for example, that Georgia is not aligned with the EU's sanctions on Russia.
Well, that's an issue which is, again, there are no easy issues. I've been saying publicly and in many interviews outside that I disagree with the rhetoric of the Georgian authorities when they say that we do not align with the sanctions, because that basically was not true. And it was not true. It was confirmed by the high-level visits that we had from Americans, British, and EU high-level experts on these sanctions issues. That, and I met with them in private. They considered that, in general, the administration of the sanctions was adequate for the respecting of the sanctions. That the financial sanctions were very compliant, the banks were very compliant. Since then, there are things that have been happening that create more problems than they solve. One is the resumption of the flights with Russia, because it's opening more places where there can be evasion of sanctions.
Well, so the flights themselves, that's in breach of sanctions.
The flights themselves, not really, because those companies that are flying are not those that are sanctioned. So in literal terms...
Well, the European Union has a flight ban going to and from Russia.
Yeah,
right, civilian flights. Complete. And you're not aligned with that.
Yes, but we are aligned with the name of the companies that are sanctioned or not sanctioned. So as a myself a kind of expert on sanctions because I was presiding over the sanctions committee on Iran at the time. I know that for a neighboring country it's very difficult to be as compliant as is a EU member that can close a border and it does not affect anyone else. But we have Turkish goods going through Georgia and coming from Russia. We have Armenia that is basically linked to Russia through Georgian territory. So it's much more complicated. But what has to change, I think, is the rhetoric. And what has to change is what you mentioned in the first place, which is the percentage of the decisions that we share with the European Union. And that's something that we have accepted and that we should be respecting on a higher level. Maybe we won't get to the 100%. Maybe there are things that would be too difficult for Georgia being where it is. But the trend should clearly show that we are getting closer rather than...
And this is not just about Georgia's EU aspirations. I mean, if Georgia is voicing solidarity with Ukraine, surely it should also be showing solidarity with Ukraine.
Well, it is showing solidarity with Ukraine. I think that Georgian population has given many signs of how strong is the solidarity, whether it's refugees, whether it's support by the community when that was a time. And if we look at the number of Georgians that are on their own individually, because it's not a state decision clearly, but individually fighting and dying for Ukraine. And that is the long trend of the closeness of our two nations that I'm sure exists today, will exist tomorrow, and it's
but which the government is not fully reflecting.
Well, the government cannot. There are things that it could do better, and I think that a number of policies of the EU and that we should apply and align with is something. In the expression, again, in the rhetoric, we should be showing more solidarity. I don't think that there are things that we could do, like sending arms is something that is beyond what the Georgian state, being with its occupied territories, can do. We are seeing very clearly that the pressure on those occupied territories is accentuating itself. Well, one could have said that or thought that while Russia would be fighting on the Ukrainian front, it would not have time to devote or resources to devote to the two occupied territories. We're seeing the country. At a very short time, there was some movements of equipment from the two occupied territories to the front. But now what we are seeing is an increased political pressure of the Russians on the occupied territories de facto leadership to allow them to take over the airport, to allow them to take a naval sea base that still need reconstruction. So it's not tomorrow morning, but the intent is to show that they are there, that they are consolidating their positions. A Georgian citizen was killed yesterday in Gali for no reason by the militia. All of that is showing, and we have seen, of course, the movements on this delimitation line that are there to just play on the nerves of the Georgian society. So everything is there to show that we are very much there, and we are in no way in an attitude of lessening the tension on those two occupied territories.
Is this shadow boxing, or is this a real threat?
Go and guess what is in the mind of Russians. What is clear is that they can do anything they want at any time, because the Russian forces and their military bases are there on both occupied territories. And the one Trin Valley region forces are 30-40 kilometers from Tbilisi. So it's very difficult to say, well, nothing will happen. Nobody can, I think, take this with assurance and say nothing will happen. But that should not, this question should not determine completely our policy. And that's what has dominated the Georgian politics all over these last 30 years is that whatever happens, we do not change our path towards European Union and NATO integration. And that is what the Georgian population is saying very clearly. That is today what everybody is saying, and I'm very glad to see that since the 8th of November decision by the recommendation by the Commission, the whole Georgian political spectrum is talking pro-European. And if that's the first result of this first stage, that's an excellent result. At least we have consensus, verbal consensus on that. And I hope that the decision of 15th of December, if that's confirmed, will even reinforce this unity, unanimity on this subject. It will be difficult to have that on all the political issues that we have, but at least on the European path, I think that it's very important.
Well, it's, again, the polarisation in Georgian politics is another issue that the European Commission has underlined must be reduced and that there must be greater unity. I know, how are your relations with the government now? Low
mode, I would say. After the attempt to impeachment, and think there is an attitude which is there is no longer a president that we recognize. So that makes it quite difficult to have the relations that are needed. And I think I was yesterday having a meeting with the president here and the parliament. And I think that the models that exist here, that exist in the Baltic states, these are European models when there is coordination between all the institutions, and it's the institutions that matter and not the person that is at the head of the one or other institution. And it doesn't, or it should not matter whether you like that person, whether you agree with that person. The most important is whether we can at least exchange information. But I hope that, again, this decision expected from the European Council will push us in the right direction. For myself, I'm ready, because I think for the country, for the state, it's very important to re-establish normal functioning. Again, it doesn't mean that everybody has to love everybody. We are not in...
Right, but you mentioned that they tried to impeach you. Of course, they failed. The impeachment was that you were making overseas trips without their approval. I believe that this trip to Prague right now is a trip that you contacted the government about and they did not give you approval for. Is that correct?
That was a part of the list of the European capitals that had submitted for before the decisions of the 15th of December to gather, mobilize all the possible support. So all of them were rejected. Those that were not directly connected with this European objective, I myself restrained from going ahead, because I don't think that there is a need to amplify this type of...
So just to be clear, you're here without permission, as it were?
Yes, yes. I was here without permission because it was all denied at the same time. And I said and I maintained that all the capitals that were to be visited before this decision of December, I would visit. And especially here, since this is the first official visit of a Georgian president in the Czech Republic after 30 years of diplomatic relations, I thought that despite the fact that I don't think that at this point in time there was a need for mobilizing the support which is there, but I think it would have been disrespectful of a partner of the European Union to reject a visit, which is a first visit, and that was a visit that was confirmed, an invitation by the Czech authorities.
So is that it now?
That there was
could they try and impeach you again? I mean, what do you think?
No, I think that there is a double jeopardy that applies to those visits, and I don't think that politically, even for them, it makes sense. What we need, again, I think, is to find ways for this year to come, which will be a very important year for Georgia, to find some way to lessen at least these tensions. And I'm doing that because I'm going back tomorrow to invite all the political forces and all the previous administrations in my residence, together with the diplomatic corps, to be present when we transmit to the ambassador of the European Union the signatures that result from the campaign that we had started a few weeks ago after the 8th of November. And as a sign, not that I'm taking something in my hand as some would like to see, but as a signal and a symbol of the fact that everybody contributed to this result. All the previous administrations had their role, all the political forces had their role, of course the population, and of course the government.
All the previous administrations, so Mikhail Saakashvili too? Yes,
of course.
You've declined to pardon him.
I've not declined. I don't make comments on pardon unless I say that I pardon someone. And that is not related to the fact that he has a huge role in launching the Georgian path, not only himself, but Shevardnadze had a role. He was really the first one to open the gate. Zurabishviltan, who 60 years was celebrated a few days ago, had an immense role, and everybody remembers that he said, was the first one to say, I'm Georgian, therefore European. All of that, all of these persons, all of these governments and administration have had their role.
Okay.
Unfortunately, in Georgia, governments that start very well tend to turn a bit autocratic.
I'm getting a signal we're out of time. May I ask just one last question? I mentioned a pardon for Saakashvili, you've answered that. A pardon for Lazare Grigoriadis is also an issue.
I mentioned that it's not correct for any president in any country to comment on pardons, because that's one of these discretionary rights that detains the president, and where if you start commenting and start giving explanations on that, then it's very discriminatory towards those other people that are in jail, that have also asked for pardon, and have nobody to support them, including journalists outside of the country.
Okay, so you're not going to comment on that?
I'm not commenting.